Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's Sunday night video. This week I am covering a little bit of history about St Alban's Church in Earsdon. As I have mentioned in at least one of my earlier videos, the Sunday night videos are a real mixture of local history stories, unsolved crime stories, and also a lot of videos that will be filmed in some wonderful old churches, churchyards and cemeteries. And having recently filmed two at St Albans in Earsdon, I thought it would be nice to do a little story in more depth about the church itself, which I think I did mention in at least one of those location videos. So I hope you will enjoy it and find it interesting. But before we begin, can I just say, if you do enjoy this video, then please give it a thumbs up. And if you're new here or haven't already done so, then do please consider subscribing to the channel to help support the content we create. Thank you. And I would just like to add, as I always do, that I do record these stories live, so I do sometimes make mistakes, which I always try to rectify, so I do hope this does not spoil your enjoyment of the video. There was said to be a chapel on the site of the current church at Earsdon, which dated back to the 13th century. Now, if you look at this photo that you can see on screen at the moment, which I hope you can read the writing on it because the sun was shining on it when I took it, it shows the notice board at the entrance to the church, and on here it states that Christians have worshipped here since the 11th century. Now, I did mention this in one of my location videos, and I did do a little bit of searching, but was not really able to find anything out about this. Of course, I am not a historian, so I am not able to access all records, only what I can find in news archives and online, etc. So maybe there is something about this out there, but I just can't find it. However, I have seen a drawing of the earlier chapel, the one built in the early 13th century, and I have to say that it does bear some resemblance to the church you see today. It looks similar in length and has a similar tower, however it does have a somewhat different entrance porch. Sadly, due to copyright issues, I can't share this photo of the drawing with you, and I haven't had enough time to draw my own version, so you might simply just have to imagine how it looked unless I have time to draw it before I actually create this video as a finished article, because I am recording it a few weeks before I will be putting it all together. One thing I did notice was that the drawing showed the church as if it was leaning down towards the hills in what would be the left-hand side of the entrance to the current church, and I hope that this was just some kind of bizarre style of the artist and not that the church was slowly sinking. The name Earsdon apparently comes from a much earlier word which to me looks like Desdon, and I am sorry if I have pronounced that incorrectly, but I am well known for not pronouncing words correctly. Anyway, this apparently translated as Hill of Red Earth. And the St Albans part is reported to come from the fact that the earlier chapel had been in the care of the monks of Tynemouth, who were ruled from the Benedictine monastery at St Albans. So this, it seems, is why the new church was dedicated to St Alban. And St Alban was, for anyone wondering, the first recorded British Christian martyr. Now, I'm not going to cover his story, as it is a little bit too complicated and not something I want to try and explain to anyone. However, I will say that there are many, many churches dedicated to St Alban all over the world. By the time the chapel at Earsdon was demolished in around 1836 to 1837, it was beginning to become a little bit dilapidated. It was said that it had also been partially destroyed by a fire. And also, just like many other areas in the northeast, the village of Earsdon was starting to grow, and the old chapel only had enough space inside for 200 people, so something larger was needed, and the new church would have space for around, I believe, 600 people. Sadly, as it was such a long time ago when the church was built, there is very little information about it that I could find, which is a shame, as I do always like to try and add as much history of the building as I can. However, I do have a little information about the early history and the building and the church itself, which is as follows. The church was designed by John and Benjamin Green of Newcastle and had been built at a cost of around £2,000, which today would be around £281,000. It was said to be 79 feet long and 30 feet wide. The church was also said to occupy a site which was the highest point in the district. And it is fairly true to say that you can see the church today from quite a distance away. It was said that the records held in the church dated back to 1590, and that at one time the parish was the largest in England, as it also included Blythe and Seg Hill. In 1867, the church held a bazaar to raise money for some new lamps. Now, the article actually said that it was to raise money for some new lamps and etc., but it didn't actually tell you what the etc. was, so I don't know what else they were raising money for. The bazaar was held over 2 days on Whit Monday and Whit Tuesday in June, and there would be a band playing music on both days, but the article did not say which band, but I did wonder if it would have been one of the colliery bands. The entrance fee was quite a lot, considering this was 1867 and people were not all well off. On the Monday, the bazaar was open from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. and it would cost 1 shilling to get in until 3 p.m. Then the price went down to sixpence for the last hour. The event was open again the same night from 5 p.m. until 9 p.m. and that would also cost sixpence entry free. Now, it has to be said that clearly the best day to go was Tuesday, as then the entry fee all day was only sixpence. And on both days, children under 12 would gain entry for 1 penny. There was also to be a field used for, as described at the time, games of various kinds, and the entry fee for this was 2 pence for adults, and children under 12 were free to enter. The refreshments would be available for a moderate charge. So it was quite an expensive day out, and this was before you had bought any of the items for sale at the bazaar itself. Sadly, there was no follow-up article, so I do not know how much money was raised. Also in March of 1867, it was said that workmen had been busy erecting a new bell room and bell ringers gallery for the new turret clock that had been generously paid for by Mr. Hugh Taylor of Earsdon. The clock had been made by Reed and Sons of Grey Street, and I can only assume that would be Grey Street in Newcastle. The clock was said to strike the hours, the half hours and the quarter hours, which if you watched either of my videos filmed in the churchyard recently, you will know that it still does this. The clock was engraved with the following inscription. This clock, together with a peal of bells, was presented to St. Alban's Church, Earsdon, by Mr. Hugh Taylor, Esquire, A.D. 1867. The tower had undergone extensive alterations to allow the clock to be put in place, and this work had been done by Elliot and Bertram, though they did not give a location of where this firm was based. On the completion of the work, the workmen were treated to a supper at the house of Mr. Robert Blackburn of Earsdon, and this had also been paid for by Mr. Taylor. And at this supper, many speeches were given thanking all of the various different people for the work on the clock tower. And it was then stated that sadly Mr. Hugh Taylor had been unable to attend the supper due to being indisposed, and the Reverend Mason wished him good health and hoped that he would soon be able to leave his room and be restored to full health. He went on to say that the clock was an enduring monument that would be in place long after its donor had, as the Reverend put it, gone to the abode of silence. The Reverend Masons also said that the bells would now peal to remind the parishioners of the Sunday service and also at the funerals held in the village. Mr. Hugh Taylor would, it seems, sadly not recover his full health, and he died in 1838. And Hugh was a land agent to the Duke of Northumberland, a job he had inherited after his own father had died, and after his death he left £1,600 to the village of Earsdon, where he did live, and 1/3 was given to the elderly of the village, and 2/3 went to the Earsdon parochial school. Now this, today, would have been around £222,000, so it really was a great gift to leave to the village. In 1883, it was found that the churchyard was becoming overcrowded, and an extension to the burial ground was needed. The extra land was 1¼ acres, and some of this land had been given to the church by the Duke of Northumberland, and the new portion of the graveyard was consecrated in October of 1883. The issue of overcrowding in churchyards was quite common. However, not all were lucky enough to have land close by to extend to. Some simply had to close, and a new cemetery would have to be built somewhere else in the area. In September of 1887, a Jubilee dedication festival took place at St Alban's Church. During the speeches and sermons from the various vicars who attended the service, it was stated that they were celebrating 50 years of worship in the church. The service mostly consisted of various sermons, which I will not include here, but I will say that it ended with a public tea which was held in the school room and was said to have been very well attended. And in 1929, an article in the paper appeared stating that the church was celebrating its 92nd birthday. Sadly, it was not noted in the newspaper if anything was taking place at the church to commemorate this anniversary. However, it did mention that still inside the church was said to be an old pair of handcuffs belonging to one of the original village constables from many years ago, though sadly the exact age of these handcuffs was not mentioned. Does anyone listening know if they are still there? The article also said that the current vicar was the Reverend C.J.C. Pratt, and that the oldest resident in the village was a Mr. John Anderson, who was 96 years old, and he was an honorary warden of the church, and had served under 5 or 6 vicars before the Reverend Pratt. Strangely, and I did look, I was not able to find any mention of the church reaching 100 years old, which would have been in 1937, but it may just have simply been that my search criteria didn't bring anything up, and we will now have to wait until 2037 to celebrate 200 years since the church was built. I do hope that you have enjoyed this brief little history of St Alban's Church, whose history I have only really covered up until 1929, as it would take a long time to cover the entire history from then until today, and I did not want to make the video too long, but I do hope that you have still found it interesting. And if anyone listening was married or christened at the church, then do please let me know in the comments below. I do thank you all very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again very soon.